When spring finally shows signs of life here in Zone 3, many gardeners are eager to fill their pots and garden beds with some fresh color. But the chilly nights and unpredictable frosts mean that we need to choose our plants very wisely. Welcome to the Garden Gamble, where we're planting hope, taking chances, and growing memories for every season. I'm Ricky Clausen, owner of Clausen's Greenhouse in northern Minnesota. This podcast is for anyone who's ever stood in the garden, greenhouse, or backyard wondering if they're doing it right. Here we talk real-life gardening, the wins, the mistakes, and everything we learn along the way. Whether you're new to plants or have dirt permanently under your nails, you're in the right place. Let's take the gamble and grow together. Hey everyone, it's Ricky and welcome back to another episode of the Garden Gamble podcast. And today's episode is going to be all about cool weather annuals or cold tolerant annuals. I know here in the north, and I'm sure gardeners across the country are itching to get their hands in the dirt and get to gardening. It's after the long winter. We just really look forward to that. We are mid-April right now, and I am just ready to start doing a little bit more planting. And I know I'm pretty fortunate as a greenhouse owner. I kind of get my hands in the dirt a little sooner than most, but that's kind of why I wanted to do today's episode on cold tolerant annuals. So the rest of you can have some good ideas of what you can plant a little bit earlier in the spring compared to some of those heat-loving summer annuals. So today's episode, I'm going to break it down into 7 different annuals that can tolerate the cold a little bit better. Plus, at the end of today's episode, I am going to give a few honorable mentions as well. So let's break it down into the 7 different ones that it suggests for planting if you really want to get started early. So the one that if you are familiar with gardening, you probably already know the number one, pansies and violas. You'll see these often at greenhouses and garden centers. They're some of the first spring annuals that they set out, and it's for this reason. They can tolerate the cold a little bit better than a lot of other flowers can. So pansies and violas, they're so cute, they're so dainty. Here at the greenhouse, we even have a trailing variety of pansies, the cool wave pansies. We sell them, we call them little pansy bowls. It's literally in like a little bowl, and it kind of drapes over the side. It's really cute, and they're so fragrant this year. We just brought them to the Home Sport and Family Show last weekend, and everyone that walked by, they're like, oh, I could smell your booth from way down there, because we brought a bunch of those pansy bowls, and they smell so good. That was just really lovely. So pansies and violas, they have a cold tolerance of down to 25 degrees. That's pretty wild if you ask me. That's well into freezing. So pansies and their smaller cousins, violas, are kind of the superstars of spring. Not only do they come in a rainbow of colors, but they also bounce back from light frosts and even a little dusting of snow. So some tips, you can plant them in containers, window boxes, or beds near entryways. And then you want to deadhead some spent blooms to keep them going strong. I already mentioned too that you can also plant them, especially like those cool wave ones that trail. You can plant them in hanging baskets, which I think would be really convenient. So hanging baskets and containers would be convenient. So then on those super cold nights that maybe it's even colder than that 25 degrees that they can handle, you can just bring them inside the house real conveniently. Just pick them up, move them inside, and then bring them back out again in the morning. Next up on the list is snapdragons. Now, snapdragons also have a cold tolerance of down to 25 degrees. So snapdragons, if you're not familiar, they are really tall. They kind of offer that vertical interest and that classic like cottage garden charm. They thrive in the cool temps, and are a great choice for adding height in your early season planters, especially if you're considering last week's episode with the thriller, filler, spiller method. This one would be a great thriller for the early spring. I grow a lot of snapdragons in the flower farm. They're one of the first ones that I put out there in the early spring, and they are some of the last ones that are still going late into the season, into end of September, even early October, because they do have that cold tolerance, which is really nice for those end of season bouquets for me in the flower farm. A little side thing here too, snapdragons are actually our two boys. We've got two little boys and now a little girl. But our two boys, that I would say is their favorite flower, because you can kind of pinch the petals and make them roar like a dragon. It kind of looks like a dragon roar when you pinch the sides there. So they have a really good time playing with the snapdragons, especially in the summer when they're out in the flower farm with me. So that's kind of fun. One kind of cool thing about snapdragons too is I did say that they do make a great thriller, which they're most commonly known for being nice and tall, but there are snapdragons that are available in dwarf and even now trailing snapdragons as well. We have a few trailing snapdragons in hanging baskets here at the greenhouse, and for in like garden beds and containers, there are dwarf varieties that work really well for container gardening. Cooler temps kind of can bring out some more vibrant colors in their blooms, and they really do thrive when nighttime temps are in the 40s and daytime temps are in the 70s. So they do have a high cold tolerance, but that's kind of where they thrive. Next up on the list is Dusty Miller. This is one of my personal favorites for foliage. And one fun fact about Dusty Miller, so Dusty Miller is like a silvery leaf, just foliage that adds some really nice texture, but it's one of my favorites, and Dusty Miller can actually be used as a cut flower. I guess not, it's not a flower, but you can use it in cutting gardens, I should say, as kind of like that greenery and filler in bouquets. So I do grow Dusty Miller, a little bit taller variety, in the flower farm, and it just adds a really nice texture to bouquets. And I love using it in containers as well for that same reason. It kind of has like a soft leaf, and it's almost silvery in color. So that one's kind of fun. I love adding it with purples and blues and other like cool colors. That's how I like to use it anyway. I do know some other people that love kind of doing like the opposite and planting it with like a bright red, but it's just a wonderful, wonderful plant. So Dusty Miller has a cold tolerance of down to 30 degrees, but if it is getting down to like a hard freeze, I would definitely recommend protecting it. Next up on the list is alyssum. Now, if you've ever been to the greenhouse or if you've ever bought alyssum before, you know that sweet alyssum has such a lovely, lovely fragrance. I would compare it kind of to almost like a lilac bloom with its fragrance. It's very sweet and it's really lovely. It's a teensy tiny little low growing flower that spills beautifully over the edges of pots and in some raised beds. The tiny fragrant blooms are also very bee friendly and surprisingly frost tolerant. They do have a tolerance of down to 24 degrees. They grow well in full sun and part shade, and like I said, they're bee friendly. They attract the pollinators in that early season, so they're lovely for the pollinators early on too. Next up is ornamental kale. Kale. It's a leafy green, but it's grown more for its looks rather than as a vegetable or for kale for eating. Well, it is technically edible. It's very, very bitter, and I really wouldn't suggest it. Just grow it for its looks, and we'll leave it at that. But ornamental kale has a cold tolerance of up to down to 15 degrees, roughly. That's wild. So They are kind of a workhorse in the early spring, and you'll actually find more flowering kale or ornamental kale in fall arrangements. You'll notice some that get put with like the mums and the rubrum, like purple fountain grass in fall arrangements that you'll see at garden centers and box stores in the fall because it is so cool tolerant. So that's really awesome. They do well in pots and borders. I have a customer that actually uses ornamental kale along her fence line, which she's shown me a picture. It's really, really, really pretty. She does like every other with like a flower. I can't remember which flower she uses, but she does like a flower, then this ornamental kale, and goes kind of every other. And it's really, really striking. A fun way to use it. The one downfall, like most things, unfortunately, is the deer love the ornamental kale. I had it in a pot at the end of our driveway a number of years ago, and they chewed that down to basically nothing. So kind of keep that in mind. I know the deer go after pretty much anything, but they do really like the ornamental kale. All right, next up is dianthus. This is one of my favorite flowers for container gardening. I just think it's kind of one of those underrated flowers. I love the way it looks, and it does have a cold tolerance of down to 30 degrees. They're cheerful, kind of clove-scented flowers, and they bloom in some rich tones of pinks and reds and whites, even some purples. I grow dianthus in the flower farm, some certain varieties that grow a little bit taller that do well for bouquets, but there are some dwarf ones that work really well in containers that we sell here in the greenhouse. Dianthus love the cool weather and bloom again in the fall. If you deadhead them, kind of die off. I would say, I know a lot of people say like they'll continue to grow into the fall, but I got blooms with my dianthus in the flower farm all summer long. And I don't know if that's just because we're here in northern Minnesota and maybe it doesn't really get all that hot through the middle of the summer. I mean, it does, but maybe not as hot as some southern areas anyway. I don't know. But I got mine to bloom all summer long, and it bloomed a ton. I got a lot of harvests out of it. So that was really lovely. The next one that we have on the list is stock. This one has a cold tolerance down to 25 degrees. And not only does stock bloom in the early spring, but it also brings a heavenly fragrance to your garden. This upright flower comes in pastels and jewel tones and loves the cool weather. Stock really is very fragrant and it smells so good. You can combine it with alyssum and pansies, which are also very fragrant, for a scent-filled combo, and it prefers full sun, especially in those cool temps. The stock that I grow in the flower farm, I treat it as kind of just a one and done cut myself for bouquets. So I do these ones in the early spring. When they get to the point where I need to harvest them for bouquets, I cut them and then I actually pull them out and replant that spot with a more heat tolerant annual for the rest of the summer. Here's a few extra tips and bonuses. So you've picked out your cool tolerant plants and you want to get out there. I would definitely start with hardening off the plants. When planting early, you want to make sure that the annuals that you purchase are hardened off, and that just means that they've gradually acclimated to outdoor temps. This helps prevent transplant shock and ensures that your plants are ready to face those chilly nights that we get. When growing them here in the greenhouse, of course, they're in a very protected environment. It's often much warmer here in the greenhouse. So hardening them off, like bringing them inside and outside, just slowly increasing the number of hours that you leave them outside in the cooler weather to harden them off and get them acclimated, the more success that you're going to have with them, especially if you know that there's some colder nights coming up. Another tip I would suggest is choosing a sunnier and more protected spots like near buildings to kind of help moderate those temperature swings. I would also recommend using containers or planters that can be moved if a hard freeze is in the forecast. So anything that you can kind of move into your garage, into your home for the night, you're gonna have more success there. You can also cover them with frost cloth for the night and then uncover them in the mornings, and that would help too. You're going to want to water sparingly in cold temps because roots don't like sitting in wet, cold soil. Even if the weather still feels a little bit like winter, especially here in northern Minnesota, I hope that these cold tolerant annuals can bring joy and some color back to your landscape and your front porches. Do want to move on now to a few honorable mentions that didn't make the top list, but there's some other really wonderful ones too. My first one is ranunculus. This is another one that I plant just in the flower farm here in the spring because it can tolerate the cold. It really likes those cooler temps. We actually don't sell these in the greenhouse. And the reason why I don't is because once that midsummer, actually usually towards end of June, early July, when temps start really starting to climb and we've got hotter days, they quit blooming. So I want you to have a plant that continues to bloom for most of the season when you come here to the greenhouse. So that's a big reason why we don't sell them. Maybe we will in the future, I'm not sure, but right now we don't. I just grow them in the flower farm as a cut flower or bouquets in the early summer and spring because they are cold hardy and kind of like those cooler temps. Some other honorable mentions that I have is osteospermum. Petunias are surprisingly cool tolerant. Nemesia and some lobelia as well. So those are a few honorable mentions that I just wanted to quickly add to the list. And although, just remember this, although these are cold tolerant, many plants may look a little bit ragged after frequent cold spells. So keep a close eye on those temps, and when in doubt, either cover or bring them to warmer annuals. Well, hopefully it won't be too much longer before we can actually get into our gardens and do a little bit more with plants and get our hands in the dirt. It won't be too much longer. Here at the greenhouse, we open May 1st, and we can't wait to see all of our customers again and really get to planting. We will see you next week. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me on The Garden Gamble. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with a fellow plant lover. Gardening isn't a gamble when you have the right guidance and you don't have to figure it out alone. Until next time, take care.